This is a Story Track podcast.
Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Building Stories. I'm your host, Steve Harris, and today is my interview with Clark Machemer. He's the Senior Managing Director at Crow Holdings, who does a lot of development in the Northeast, and I'm excited to hear about that, and take a listen. Clark, thank you so much for doing this podcast. I've heard so much about you throughout the years from my boss, Lori Dowd, who speaks very highly of you. And so you and Lori had met while you were at the Rockefeller Group. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. So can you kind of tell me about your career path? Because now you're with Crow. And so how did this take off? What were your first jobs and why did you get into this?
I was graduating high school in 1989 and then college in 93 and always had an interest in real estate. And a lot of that came from, I grew up in Buffalo, New York, and they were always talking about what seemed to be pretty exciting projects for redeveloping downtown or even projects in my town just outside of Buffalo. And over time, just became interested in reading those articles in the newspaper. I'll be honest, as a kid, I was reading the sports section. And then eventually you flip through the local section or the front page, and I would see these articles about economic development in general. You know, it could be a new light rail, new baseball stadium, or office building, or redoing a marina. And it always caught my eye. And, you know, over time, I started to learn a little more. And, you know, I thought, do I want to be an architect, a planner, an attorney? And I realized the developer is the one who's in the middle of it all and has a little more control over the ability to get a project from start to finish. Went to Syracuse University. There really weren't real estate programs at that time in the late 80s, early 90s. So went to Syracuse, was in the management school, studied finance. A friend of mine who was a year earlier suggested I take law and public policy, which was sort of like business law in business class. So I packaged that together and thought that would make me appealing to get into the real estate world. And came out of Syracuse in 93, and unbeknownst to me, there was no real estate market. And no one was hiring a kid right out of Syracuse with no real estate experience. I was fortunate that a lot of companies were coming to campus, so I started interviewing and took a job with, at that time, a company called Anderson Consulting, which is now Accenture. Was there for 5 years. I had a great 5-year run, but, you know, 3 years in or so, I still want to get into real estate, and made that decision at that point to start to look at furthering my education. And that's what led me to Columbia University in the real estate development program. Again, at that point in time, MIT had a real estate program, NYU had a real estate program, Wisconsin, and University of Southern California. In some schools, you could patch together different degrees to get something like real estate. Unlike today, there's a lot of schools that have real estate programs, which is really great to see. So I left at that time technology and IT in the late 90s when that was exploding, and people said, why are you going to real estate? I said, well, that's what I want to do. And got a master's in real estate from Columbia. And coming out of that program, was very fortunate to meet a gentleman named Les Smith, who at that time was previously a partner with the Rockefeller family, and then was a senior vice president of development for the Rockefeller Group. And fortunate to meet Les. Les was based in New Jersey, Western New Jersey. And, you know, through that, you know, connection, got the opportunity to work for the Rockefeller Group in Les, and sort of ran that for 15 years. And again, about 6 years ago, got a call from Crow Holdings and made the decision to jump over to Crow Holdings, and been with Crow Holdings for the last 6 years. So that's a quick run through of how I got to where I am today.
Awesome. Yeah. And so Les sounds like he kind of mentored you, and it sounds like Les was kind of helped guide you. What's one thing that you learned from him that still kind of helps you in what you do?
Oh, I think he's a man of his word. He's the utmost respect people have for him. So that's really important. You know, at one point we had a project and a neighbor was asking for an easement, and I said, oh, wow, we got something special here. And he goes, Clark, you're never going to know when that neighbor, you need something from that neighbor. So I learned to treat everyone in the field with respect, because it is a small industry. and you never know when you're going to be crossing paths with someone in the future. That's one thing I learned. And then I learned a lot from Les. I often say that, he gave me a lot of rope to learn. But when the noose got a little tighter on my neck, he would slide that chair underneath and help me out. So it was a nice balance of, letting me learn and not fall completely or get that noose too tight, but was there to help me out when it was necessary. So, I think, just try to do what you want to do and do it the right way. And, how I was able to grow through lessons. He gave me a lot of room to grow, but was there when things got a little tight to help me out.
Awesome. Well, that sounds great. And then when you switched to Crow, like why Crow? Like I'm sure with all of that work that you had done, you really could have chose wherever you wanted to work at that point.
I don't know. I was very fortunate. We had a really great opportunity with the Rockefeller Group and enjoyed my time there immensely. I got a call from John Holland at Crow Holdings and just started a dialogue and started talking to them. And they're just a really unique place. Trammell Crow, who founded the company, is a name that everyone knows. He was a pioneer in real estate, and he was the first national developer. And growing up in the 80s and early 90s, Trammell Crow is a name that everyone knew. So once I started to learn a little more about Crow Holdings and the history of Crow Holdings, Trammell's son Harlan is our chairman. And it was a really unique opportunity and great people.
Awesome. Was there a project at the Rockefeller Group or at Crow that really changed things for you, that really launched things?
I tell people on my team, if you want to be a corporate climber and climb the rungs of a corporation, real estate development is really not the place to go. It's not, you have hierarchies all the way up. What you do is you take on bigger projects, more complex projects. You get a better gut feel of what projects are going to work or not. So it's just a gradual building of confidence over time. And I don't think there's any one project. Every project I've done, I've learned something from, be it the partners that we have, be it the challenges we have with entitlements, be it the tenants that we meet and the folks that work for those tenants. I tell different stories from each project over time that really creates a pretty deep fabric of experiences. So not to not answer the question, it's just every little project or every big project you're learning something from and taking something from it. And that's the most important thing is, take what you're learning and apply it to the next project, and no two projects are alike. So it's more than anything else, just having confidence in yourself and the team's ability to solve issues that you're facing gives you the ability to keep moving forward.
And speaking of solving problems and growing, was there any hardships on your way up or something you had to learn the hard way that you wish that you didn't?
I mean, getting entitlements in the Northeast is always a challenge. Being at a planning board hearing where there's folks behind you that don't understand the project and the benefit it brings, and opposing projects. So trying to educate local communities and the benefits of projects is something that's always challenging. That's only continued to grow over time as New Jersey becomes more and more of a built environment where you have uses that are kind of coming in conflict and working through those projects. So I would think a lot of it is just the entitlements, because that's out of our control. We're working on projects that are zoned appropriately, but you're working through offsite issues and neighbors and neighboring towns and neighboring counties. And so that's always a challenge that continues to be a challenge today.
And speaking of a challenge, I hate to even bring this word up, but COVID, was that hard for you all? Did that change things when, folks were wanting to work from home? Has that still changed the landscape?
The work from home hasn't influenced, the logistics, distribution, or warehousing, daily life. I guess what COVID did, if you look at it, you can look at it from a couple perspectives. Initially in March of 20, no one knew what was going on. We were fortunate that we were close to agreeing to terms with the tenant, and we moved forward with that deal, not knowing if we'll ever sign another lease again. And this was in, about spring or mid 2020. And, as a company, we upped our communications among, the entire company. and different regions and trying to understand what are we all seeing. And then slowly but surely, things got moving again for the logistics world. The e-commerce started to explode. And that's something that I think everyone's seen. And we were a direct beneficiary of that. That demand grew and grew and grew from 2020 until almost 2 years later, until called summer of 22, when the market started to change. And, we just jumped on along with a lot of my peers and rode that rocket ship and trying to meet the needs of our tenants who were trying to meet the needs of the U.S. population. E-commerce was growing because people were getting products delivered to their home. Not only products that you were enjoying, but products to survive, food and medicine. And that can only be done if there was a supply chain behind that product actually making it to your doorstep. And we were a small part of that. So it was really interesting for the first 2 years after COVID. It was really a rocket ship up and a lot of demand from tenants. And it was an exciting time.
And what's going on with the market now? What are you seeing?
Yeah, well, that rocket ship started to level off. June of 2022 is where it started to level off. And that was a direct response to the inflation that was out there. Interest rates started to grow, and interest rates and capital is the lifeblood of a lot of industries, and even more so in the real estate industry. So interest rates started to climb, and that started to change in the uncertainty of where those interest rates were going to go, because people's return expectations are all based upon a low, going to the lowest risk-free investment you can make. And once those interest rates started to grow, the cost of capital grew, and there's a lot of uncertainty. We could deal with high interest rates, but when people don't know where things are going, the first reaction is just to stop and let's wait. And that's what happened between mid-22 until mid-23, even into the fall of 23. And then of late, things have stabilized a bit. We're now sitting here in 2024. There's an election coming up, and there's starting to be a little more uncertainty in the market of where interest rates are going to be and what's going to happen in November. But I think for the next few months, companies need to continue to grow. When I say companies, our tenants and clients need to continue to grow. And so we're starting to see activity pick up on a lot of our projects, which is great. And that demand from tenants clearly is what drives our business. Even if capital is there, if you don't have the tenants to fill the buildings, you're going nowhere. So it ultimately comes down to the consumers, the U.S. consumers wanting to consume all the products that we consume on a daily basis, and that's what's going to drive our business.
And speaking of driving the business, does marketing seem to help you all on that side of things?
I think real estate has to inspire someone. I don't care what you're building. There needs to be an inspiration for someone to come in and commit to move their operations, to put their employees there, to live there, to shop there. A lot of what we're doing is before those buildings are built. So we got to find ways to communicate the vision of what we hope to build and develop to our clients. So that's where marketing is important. And we've tried all different avenues, between social media to direct mail pieces, to advertising, to videos, to websites. I don't think anyone in the real estate world has nailed exactly how you're going to be doing that, especially in the commercial world. If you're renting apartments or selling houses, you're marketing directly to those consumers. For us, we're trying to make sure that the brokerage community is aware of what we're building and the attributes of those buildings, so that when they get their clients, the tenants that ultimately occupy our building, those brokers can make sure that they can communicate the benefits of locating one of our projects as well as anybody else. Another side of our business is the capital stack that we're putting together, and that's debt and equity, and making sure we have relationships with those sources. And marketing of that's a little different. They'll read about us, but it's be able to prove our track record to those folks, because they're investing significant dollars along with us. And slick marketing is only going to get you so far. It needs to be that relationship. And we're big believers in sitting across the table and talking about projects and talking about our track record. And that's really important to us.
Yeah. And it seems like you've got a great team. And how have you built such a great team?
Beyond my team, the Crow Holdings organization is really what funnels so many people to want to be part of this culture. You look across the country and the various teams that exist, we get together and there's a lot of synergies there. We're hardworking, we're committed to what we're doing, a lot of respect for our peers and our competitors. So it's not just individual teams across the country, but it's the collectiveness of what makes Kroll Holdings a really unique spot. And that starts at the top down, from Trammell Crow when he was alive and running the company, to Harlan Crow, who's our chairman right now, to Michael Levy, our CEO of the entire Kroll Holdings, and Ken Valak, who's a 35 plus year Trammell Crow Holdings guy. And he's seen what's worked over the time and what hasn't worked. And then just pushing that culture, throughout the entire organization. And, people talk about culture and everyone thinks they have the best culture. I'll admit that the culture at Kroll Holdings is unique, and you feel that when you're at the individual offices, and you feel even more when you're down in Dallas at our headquarters at Old Parkland. It's just really great people that you want to spend time with and do business with.
And if there's someone who wants to work with you and wants to work at Crow, but they're just kind of starting out, what bit of advice could you give to someone?
I think it's, I'll be honest, you come work for a developer day one right out of college. Most developers, and we're smaller organizations, we don't have training in place. I think it's trying to find experience to learn basic business skills. I had that ability when I started at Anderson Consulting, to learn basic business skills, to do minutes and agendas and project planning and managing of projects. And I learned that. I think there's a lot of great, places to go where there are large organizations that can teach people the basics of real estate if you're not getting that through schooling. There's so many avenues to come into real estate. You can come in from the lending side, the equity side, the acquisition side, the brokerage side. You can come in as a professional with skills specific for engineering or architects or legal. There's a lot of different ways to get into the real estate industry. Specifically for Kroll Holdings, we look for good people that, have, strong abilities to grow and learn. And that's really important for us, because you bring someone in, you spend a lot of time with them in the first couple of years, and they start to learn the process, and you hope they can grow and flourish on their own too, as they become, more responsible for individual projects.
Sure. And some of those projects that you guys have in the works, do you have some that you would like to tell us about and share, some that you're really proud of?
Yeah, right now we have specifically here in the Northeast, we didn't talk about my responsibilities. I'm responsible for our industrial development in the Northeast, which in essence could go from Boston to DC, as far west as Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. But our focus right now is the Hudson Valley in New York State, which is really hugging the Hudson River as you go north out of New York, stretching all the way through New Jersey into Philadelphia and stretching west into Pennsylvania. So that's really our focus today. We got projects, throughout that entire region, up and down the New Jersey Turnpike corridor into Pennsylvania, and then up 87, which stretches from New York City up into the Hudson Valley. Every project's unique and different. We have a great project in Carteret, New Jersey, which is, close to the port of New York, New Jersey. Been a very challenging site. Have a great team members working on that. Couldn't do that project without all their great commitments to it. And so that's a really great project, a 3-building project, about 1.2 million square feet. Literally it's a stone's throw from an exit of the New Jersey Turnpike, which is tough to find in an infill location in northern New Jersey. So that's been a great one. It's been challenging, and we've worked through that. Obviously, first projects you do anywhere you get someone are important. We did a spec building that ultimately we leased to LG, and that project will always be important to me, and met a lot of really great people through that project, and people that we're still doing business with. The seller of that project was 2020 Acquisition and Ephraim Gersberg, and we're close friends and partners on a number of projects. So I'm really excited by that being my first project, but some great relationships that have come out of that. And then we've just completed a really unique building in northern New Jersey, just off of Interstate 80, about 10 miles west of the George Washington Bridge. It's a former Markel paper site. For those that live in northern New Jersey, it was an iconic site. It was a 5-story, early 1900 brick warehouse that had a massive Markel paper sign on that was iconic. If people were traveling I-80, they knew where they were. And that had a tragedy about 4 years ago where that building burnt to the ground. We ultimately acquired the land and have just finished construction on a new building there. And what's unique about there is just the architecture. Was it your typical concrete tilt up or precast building? We actually did a brick facade that harkened back to some of the architecture from the late 1800s. We're not too far from the Patterson Great Falls, where there's a lot of historic buildings due to the industry that existed because of the power that was generated from that falls. And we took a look back and try to capture some of those architectural elements into the building, along with some current architectural flavor to it. So that's been a really great project to work on, and we've just finished construction on that, and we're working to find a tenant for that project. So 3 unique projects. Carteret was a really challenging project. The first project that we did with LG was my first, and met a lot of great people and great relationships formed there. And then the project we're doing in Elmwood Park is, we took a little different look at it from an architectural perspective. And we've received a lot of great feedback, and feedback outside of the market too. People say, "Boy, I like that, and you may want that building in our town." So hopefully it will benefit us as we continue to move our brand forward.
You had mentioned the challenges with Carteret. Can you talk about some of those and what you all might have learned from some of those, or how you got past them?
Yeah, in New Jersey right now, we're getting close to a lot of land constraints. So the way you solve land constraints is you can find land or make land. And we bought the land from Rawway Arch and a good friend of mine, Ron D'Argenio, who did cleanup on the site. It was a contaminated site. He went in, cleaned it up, imported fill material to raise it up out of any floodplains. And then we came in and are now building buildings on that. So it was challenging just given the long history. Anything you're doing in northern New Jersey, you're not working on a farm field. So there's some historic nature to the site, and just understand the different dynamics of that project was great. And then there was a vision to it. The access in industrial, what is the transportation network in, and completing that connections to the interstate were important. And once that was done, it was an aha moment for a lot of the brokerage community. It was like, wow, I get it. I can see the proximity to the interstate and the New Jersey Turnpike. So it was, just working through a historic site and bringing a project to the market that a lot of people knew about the land, but didn't really know what the buildings and project was going to look like at the end of the day. And fortunately, we had a vision that's come to fruition here.
You talked about how, in the Northeast, there's not just a lot of plains and farmland where you can just go build. Do you like to bring new life to a building that's there, or would you prefer to do a tear down and a build up? What's your take on that?
We've done it all. We're really not buying farm fields anymore. Even sites that are farmed may have had a history of importing material in there previously. So it may be farmed today, but it's not virgin land. In Philadelphia, we went down to Philadelphia and bought an old 50-year-old building. And this was my second building I did here at Crow Holdings. We knocked it down and acquired an adjacent parcel and built a modern building that an e-commerce company ultimately occupied. So that was fun to go in. And people talk about sustainability. To go into a market in a site that had a existing building that was no longer functioning, and repurposing that site is as sustainable as you can get, because usually it's near existing infrastructure and highway systems, as opposed to just going out to the hinterlands and building and taking that next piece of land as you continue to grow outward from any urban core. So that was good. And, you always want a simple project. Give me a farm and I can just go out and do spread footings and move forward. That would be nice, but we're just not faced with that. To get projects that tenants want and capital want, they need to be infill, and they need to have, some historic nature to it that we need to figure out and overcome.
So when you're not doing work, what else are you into? What's something that someone may not know about you that you can share with us?
Family is so important, and have a great relationship. My entire family with my wife and 3 kids. You talked about what I learned from Les. Les was philanthropic and involved in not-for-profit organizations, and I saw him and the benefits he obtained from being involved in that. So I've been active in a couple of not-for-profits. I'll be done in 2 months. I'll be rolling off as chair of an organization called Pillar Care. I've been a 4-year chair of that organization. What Pillar does is provide services for special need kids, children, infants, adults, and spend a lot of time there and providing whatever support I can to the staff that's there in the organization. So spend a lot of time on that and try to stay active any way I can. I got friends that we're riding bikes, we're working out, we're playing basketball. I'm chasing my kids around who are now older. My two youngest are 16 and 17, soon to be 17, 18, and really enjoying them and watching them grow and become a unique person. So I have that aspect. And then on the social side, just built a little speakeasy in my basement and actually had some work colleagues over last night. It's just a unique spot, where there isn't a bar, there isn't a TV, it's 4 chairs and a bunch of bottles of booze, and you sit around looking at each other, having conversation. And an hour and a half conversation went by pretty quick. We were 20 minutes late to dinner, just enjoying ourselves and having some good conversation in a really comfortable room.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds great. What's your drink of choice?
Oh, I've been drinking rye of late. I've done a lot of different things. It started with my father-in-law 20 years ago going out on Christmas Eve and him drinking Manhattans and got me into the brown stuff. And so I've gone through the bourbon, the whiskeys, and right now I'm enjoying ryes. And, with summer coming around, I'll probably switch over to tequila in the next couple of weeks as the summer comes along. So awesome. Enjoy the time at the shore and ryes down at the shore in July and August. The Jersey Shore just don't work. So it's typically tequilas for me.
Well, anything we haven't touched on that you want to talk about?
No, I feel fortunate to be in this industry. I said a number of years ago, I'm active in NAIOP, which is a really great real estate industry. And I was speaking at one of their conferences talking about the industrial business. And it's not our, grandfather's business. When people think of industrial on the development side and land acquisition side, it used to be 2 guys in a cigar and a Cadillac and some dirty old site. And that's not what we are today. It's, people using AI and iPads and technology and supply chains. It's really an innovative industry. When I got into real estate back in the early 90s, you're industrial. It's not where people want to go. Oh, I want to do office or residential. But as the sophistication of the supply chain has grown, the technologies in these buildings, and, if you design a building in the wrong part of the country, wrong location, wrong infrastructure going to the building, it could have dramatic impacts on that company. So it's really interesting how it's evolved over time. And when, I always enjoy speaking to, individuals or college students looking to get into the industry, to hear them saying, I'm interested in industrial, and somewhat because they're talking to me, that would make a lot of sense to do that, but they truly mean it. And it's become pretty innovative and a lot of problem solving and thinking and structuring of transactions, which are challenging on an everyday basis. And then luckily, a lot of these projects can turn relatively quickly. We're not working on 10-year projects that a lot of projects can be. Typically it's maybe 2 or 3 years. Other types of, product types could be taking longer. So there is that constant churn of different projects. So it's a really, great industry and fortunate to have a lot of great peers. People may view them as competitors, but we're all lucky today that there's enough opportunity to go around. So yeah, we're competing for sites and tenants, but there's a lot of respect for folks in the industry. I often say, well, how did that individual get that project done? And friends and family may not get it, but people in the industry understand that. So there's been a lot of things that tie this industry together, and feel fortunate to have really a lot of great relationships. And that's when people talk like that. You want to get in something you like and the relationships you form. And it sounds, sort of cliquish, but it truly is real. And, just want to thank all the people that have supported me in my career and people that have been around me and team members, both that I've worked for, that have worked for me, that have really, allowed me to have, any type of success that I've had.
Awesome. And you had brought up AI there. Do you think AI is changing the way that you all do things?
I'll be real estate is a little slow to change. I think any other asset class, and this is just Clark, that I haven't really sat down and studied it, but almost any other asset class can tell you when you need to buy and sell something. Real estate, it's still If you're at the different quadrant of an interchange, it could be night and day. And that's tough to understand that. I think AI is going to help in the workflow, in the process. And I think it's going to allow individuals to do more is what it's going to be. There could be some seismic shifts that I don't see, but it's just to be able to be more productive and maybe looking at multiple designs of a building earlier on and churn through that. And, we're still going to have a need for architects and engineers. We're not going to turn it over to some AI software to do that because that human process is still important. We still have to get projects approved. And I got to show up at planning boards with architects and engineers. If I show up with a computer screen, that's not going to go over well. You got to connect with the township you're in. And I can't see a planning board handling me showing up with a computer. It was like wheeling in the old AV cart with the TV there, wheeling that in and letting them go at it. That's not going to work.
Right.
We're communicating with townships and we're trying to understand what works for them and what doesn't work and understanding their true needs. So there's going to be those individuals are going to be there. We're going to have architects and engineers and attorneys and contractors and most importantly, brokers and tenants that are going to be making sure we get tenants into our building.
Awesome. Well, thank you for all of your time, Clark. I've learned a lot and it's great to hear all of the great work that Crow has going. And I can't wait to see what you guys do next.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, fortunate with my time at Crow and all the great people here. Can't thank them all enough. And thanks for the time today. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks, everybody, for checking out another episode of Building Stories. To hear more like this, like and subscribe. And if you want to hear more about the great work that StoryTrack does for the building industry, check out storytrack.com.